It's a question only you can answer. Better off years ago. Not every person on stage earlier today was trying to harm Donald Trump. Her buddy and coworker, the Faulkner Focus anchor, has already covered a number of significant topics. Look it over. I would want to discuss the current state of inflation in the nation. Single mothers bear a large portion of this load, especially single black mothers. In terms of statistics, how can you reverse it? How do you intend to address the black community? Our working class, middle class, and almost every other class are being destroyed by inflation. It is a national catastrophe that destroys all nations. It is a calamity for the nation. Though I think it's worse than that, I think this is the worst inflation we've experienced in 58 years. The American dream is gone, and people can no longer afford to buy homes. Young people no longer have the American dream, especially young black people. They are unable to borrow money or purchase homes because of the high cost of living, which includes inflation and housing. Our nation is being destroyed by inflation, a calamity. Being here today is more than simply a means of support. I'm delighted you had the chance to see me up there as well. It was lovely to see you too. You may have thought it was antagonistic, but perhaps I misheard the audience. Am I mistaken in supposing that many individuals were applauding Donald Trump? There were enough folks paying attention to get his humor and chuckle at that. Additionally, there were a few occasions when his remarks were met with opposition. He was talking about energy and drill baby drill and inflation and how things might be turned around. He talked about pursuing the industry to lower costs and all of these things, lowering living expenses while maintaining quality. Someone in the front seat was unable to see the woman as he was getting into all of that, but it seemed like she was waving and grinning. Okay, see, you know what I'm talking about, a lot of people said. You understand what I mean. When we talk about the economy as human beings, there are some common ideas that come up. I gave a few things some thought today. It bothers me when you act just on your feelings. As a journalist and interviewee, you may start the conversation by being emotionally invested and intimate. Here's what happens. People will vote depending on whether or not they like each other on stage, as long as the concerns are kept out of the conversation. They will cast votes to determine if he covered important ground or omitted anything they really needed to know. Given that we only have 96 days left, please assist me in choosing. Given that voters will effectively be choosing the Democratic nominee this November, how should I make my decision? In contrast, consider the individual who traveled to a very unfriendly location, anticipating a large number of demonstrators as well as covert animosity from the National Association of Black Protesters. The host was under pressure. President Trump requested that the invitation be sent to him again. The co-chairs of the significant yearly event resigned yesterday, giving various reasons for their resignation. They listed elements that included both external and internal pressure. This pressure was a component of the machinery used to secure Donald Trump's appearance as a keynote speaker at this significant Black journalists' convention. I wanted to learn more about the senator's activities that we covered because I saw potential to push. I saw the program in which you put pressure on the president. With all of his past gaffes, why did you pick him? Can he handle day one? At times, audio proved to be a genuine challenge, problems that we were more than willing to assist with. They made a poor decision by taking a different route. Not every time could we hear one another. I believe I mentioned myself a few times. We've answered that query that many have posed, but not sufficiently. Why him? What is your future plan? He inquired. He informed me that I had stated this to the audience today, 4 hours after I had sat with him on the day he was shot. Choosing a vice president is crucial, you said to me, as you now understand that negative things might happen. After making 2 references to it, something terrible occurred 4 hours later. Are you trusting this guy then? Furthermore, discuss him if you do. He said something, but I believe it has to be spoken again. She intends to select a different vice president. Prepared for that? This man, is he ready? I was unable to answer all of the questions. It makes things tough for me as a journalist when you break down and become emotional. We're going to have a genuine talk, as promised, and I try my best to get us back on course. I'm glad that some of the media who were critical of the Trump invitation scenario have since changed their ways. The coverage now includes viewpoints from across the world in addition to local and national media. I believe that's where we ought to be. The good thing about this whole issue is that I don't want journalists to become activists. In the end, identity politics are not my thing. I am aware of our common faith. I object to demographic divisions. For me, the essential point is this. In your city, do you feel safer and more secure? Are the boundaries better guarded? How are things going for you and your family financially? What is the state of your finances? Is the nation's educational system a means of achieving success? On the global stage, how are we doing? What part does she play in the global arena? I felt that you completed the duty admirably. At the National Association of Black Journalists convention in Chicago on Wednesday, Donald Trump started a live interview by criticizing harshly Rachel Scott of ABC, one of the event moderators. He then accused Scott of being late to a presentation and questioned Vice President Kamala Harris' racial identity. In front of the NABJ membership, the former president and former host of Apprentice TV, along with Scott and Harris Faulkner of Fox News and political reporter Katia Goba, conducted an interview. Without any delay, the former president used derogatory words to characterize Scott. Scott shook Trump's hand and invited him to the stage at the beginning of the interview. She said, "Nice meeting you," and gave her full name before Trump sat down next to her and her peers. After saying, "We so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time," Scott turned to face Trump and asked her question. "The first thing I want to do, sir, is address the big problem. Many did not think it was proper that you should be here today," she said. "You've spread untrue rumors about some of your opponents, including false allegations that they weren't born in the United States, to Nikki Haley and former President Barack Obama. You've instructed 4 American citizens who identify as congresswomen of color to return to their native countries. It seems that you have characterized black district attorneys as rabid and animal. Black journalists have been assaulted by you, who labeled them as losers and said their inquiries were racially and intellectually foolish. At your Mar-a-Lago property, you had dinner with a white nationalist. My issue is this, sir. Given your use of language like that, why should black voters believe you now that you're asking them to vote for you?" In response, Trump shifted the attention on Scott. "First question, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a terrible way. Not even, 'Hello, how are you?' is said. Do you work for ABC? Because in my opinion, they are a bad network that spreads bogus news." Trump retorted, "I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit, insisting that his initiatives, which include his collaboration with Senator Tim Scott, are a reflection of his love for America's black people." Scott's question was subsequently referred to by Trump as a very rude introduction, and he expressed surprise at the way he had been introduced to the audience. Why you would do such an action is beyond me. To elaborate, let me say that I was informed my opponent, either Joe Biden or Kamala, would be attending this event after I received an invitation. My opponent isn't here, it turns out. You brought me in on false pretenses, he went on. You arrived here 30 minutes late after that. Please realize that I respect you too much to be late. Either their equipment wasn't functioning properly, or there was a problem. It seems like a rather harsh question to ask. He again went back to address Scott's opening question. For you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace. I really do. He then engaged in a brief debate with Scott about whether or not he was a better president for black people than Lyndon B. Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Trump doubled down on the very hostile, nasty tone he said Scott used during the panel and kept bringing up the claim that Scott was late to the event. At one point, he even claimed, "You're the one that held me up at 35 minutes prior to the speaking engagement." Entertainment Weekly was informed by a local source that Trump insisted the NABJ not fact-check his responses in real time, which caused the event to start later than scheduled. For the remainder of the interview, Trump and Scott argued about what diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives meant. He also accused Scott of having a bad microphone at the event. Furthermore, based on his estimation, Harris, who is of both Indian and Black heritage, was Indian all the way in her early career, before all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a Black person. Before leaving the stage after the interview, Scott gave Trump another handshake. Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary for the White House, responded to Trump's inflammatory remarks on Harris shortly after the interview. Harris is anticipated to accept the Democratic nomination for president and run against Trump in November. As a Black woman who is in this position standing before you at this podium, behind this lectern, what he just said, what you just read out to me, is repulsive. It's insulting, she stated to reporters. No one is entitled to dictate to another person their identity or method of identification. Nobody has that right. It's an individual's choice. Her experience speaks for itself. She is the only one who has the ability to speak about what it's like. It doesn't matter if it's a past president or leader, it is offensive to all of them, in my opinion. Kamala Harris is the Vice President of the United States. Her name ought to be respected. End of story. Reporter April Ryan, who is a member of NABJ, attacked Trump on X after he made remarks against Harris and Scott. She said, "Trump came into our home, a Black press advocacy convention, and insulted us in our face. Worse, the leadership of NABJ invited him to do this. Shame." Regarding Trump's statements during the event, Harris's team also shared their thoughts. Michael Tyler, the communications director for Harris for President, said in a statement given to EW that the hostility Donald Trump showed on stage today is the same hostility he has shown throughout his life, throughout his term in office, and throughout his campaign for president as he seeks to regain power and inflict his harmful Project 2025 agenda on the American people. Trump lobbed personal attacks and insults at Black journalists the same way he did throughout his presidency, while he failed Black families and left the entire country digging out of the ditch he left us in, Tyler stated. EW has contacted Scott and ABC News' spokespeople for feedback. The president of NABJ, Ken Lemon, gave a statement to local ABC News following Trump's announced appearance at the organization's event on Wednesday. He stated that while the group does not endorse political candidates, it does welcome the opportunity for its membership to ask the tough questions that will provide the truthful answers Black Americans want and need to know. It's a question only you can answer. Better off years ago. This phrase reflects a sentiment that resonates with many people today, especially in light of the current economic climate. The state of inflation in the nation has become a pressing issue, affecting various demographics and socioeconomic classes differently. Single mothers, particularly single Black mothers, are disproportionately burdened by this economic strain. Her buddy and coworker, the Faulkner Focus anchor, has covered a number of significant topics, including inflation. The discussions and analyses provided by the show highlight the multifaceted nature of this economic problem. The rise in prices affects everything from housing to groceries, making it harder for people to make ends meet. I would want to discuss the current state of inflation in the nation. Inflation has reached levels that many experts believe are the highest in nearly 6 decades. This surge in the cost of living has eroded the purchasing power of the average American, making it challenging for families to afford basic necessities. Single mothers bear a large portion of this load, especially single Black mothers. These mothers often face unique challenges, including lower wages and limited access to affordable childcare, which are exacerbated by rising prices. In terms of statistics, how can you reverse it? How do you intend to address the Black community? Tackling this issue requires a multifaceted approach, including economic policies aimed at reducing inflation, increasing wages, and providing targeted support to vulnerable communities. Our working class, middle class, and almost every other class are being destroyed by inflation. This statement underscores the widespread impact of inflation across different socioeconomic groups. The middle class, often seen as the backbone of the economy, is particularly hard hit. It is a national catastrophe that destroys all nations. It is a calamity for the nation. Inflation not only affects individual households, but also has broader implications for the economy. High inflation can lead to reduced consumer spending, higher interest rates, and economic instability. Though I think it's worse than that, I think this is the worst inflation we've experienced in 58 years. Comparing current inflation rates to historical data can help put the situation into perspective. The last time inflation was this high, the country faced significant economic challenges. The American dream is gone, and people can no longer afford to buy homes. Homeownership has long been a cornerstone of the American dream, but rising prices have put it out of reach for many. Young people no longer have the American dream, especially young Black people. The high cost of living, coupled with stagnant wages, makes it difficult for young people to save for a down payment on a house or even to secure affordable rent. They are unable to borrow money or purchase homes because of the high cost of living, which includes inflation and housing. Access to credit is crucial for homeownership, but high inflation makes it harder for people to qualify for loans. Our nation is being destroyed by inflation, a calamity. The long-term effects of sustained high inflation can lead to economic decline and decreased quality of life for many Americans. Being here today is more than simply a means of support. Addressing inflation requires more than just financial aid. It necessitates structural changes in the economy. I'm delighted you had the chance to see me up there as well. It was lovely to see you too. Public perception and engagement are essential for addressing and solving economic issues. You may have thought it was antagonistic, but perhaps I misheard the audience. Sometimes discussions about inflation and economic policies can become heated, reflecting the frustration and anxiety people feel. Am I mistaken in supposing that many individuals were applauding Donald Trump? Public figures often become focal points in discussions about economic issues, influencing public opinion and policy decisions. He was talking about energy and drill baby drill and inflation and how things might be turned around. Energy policy plays a crucial role in addressing inflation, as energy costs directly affect the cost of living. He talked about pursuing the industry to lower costs and all of these things. Industrial policies aimed at reducing production costs can help mitigate inflation, lowering living expenses while maintaining quality. Achieving this balance is key to ensuring that economic policies are effective and sustainable. Someone in the front seat was unable to see the woman as he was getting into all of that, but it seemed like she was waving and grinning. Personal interactions and observations can provide insight into how people are experiencing and perceiving economic conditions. When we talk about the economy as human beings, there are some common ideas that come up. Understanding the shared concerns and priorities of the public is crucial for developing effective economic policies. I gave a few things some thought today. It bothers me when you act just on your feelings. Emotions often play a significant role in shaping public opinion and policy decisions. As a journalist and interviewee, you may start the conversation by being emotionally invested and intimate. The way economic issues are discussed and presented can influence public perception and policy outcomes. Here's what happens. People will vote depending on whether or not they like each other on stage, as long as the concerns are kept out of the conversation. Voter behavior can be influenced by personal impressions and emotional responses rather than policy details. They will cast votes to determine if he covered important ground or omitted anything they really needed to know. Comprehensive and accurate coverage of economic policies is essential for informed voting. Given that we only have 96 days left, please assist me in choosing. Time-sensitive decisions require careful consideration of all available information and perspectives. Given that voters will effectively be choosing the Democratic nominee this November, how should I make my decision? Voter decisions will have significant implications for future economic policies and the overall direction of the country. In contrast, consider the individual who traveled to a very unfriendly location, anticipating a large number of demonstrators as well as covert animosity from the National Association of Black Protesters. Navigating hostile environments and public opposition is part of the challenge faced by policymakers and public figures. The host was under pressure. Hosting discussions on contentious issues like inflation can be challenging and requires careful moderation. President Trump requested that the invitation be sent to him again. Public figures often seek opportunities to address critical issues and engage with the public. The co-chairs of the significant yearly event resigned yesterday, giving various reasons for their resignation. Leadership changes can impact the direction and focus of discussions on economic policies. They listed elements that included both external and internal pressure. Navigating pressures from multiple sources is a common challenge in addressing complex economic issues. This pressure was a component of the machinery used to secure Donald Trump's appearance as a keynote speaker at this significant Black journalists' convention. High-profile speakers can draw attention to critical issues and shape public discourse. I wanted to learn more about the senator's activities that we covered because I saw potential to push. Understanding the actions and policies of public officials is essential for informed discussion and decision-making. I saw the program in which you put pressure on the president. Holding public figures accountable for their economic policies is a key role of the media and public discourse. With all of his past gaffes, why did you pick him? Can he handle day one? Evaluating the competence and preparedness of public officials is crucial for effective governance. At times, audio proved to be a genuine challenge, problems that we were more than willing to assist with. Technical difficulties can hinder effective communication and public engagement on important issues. They made a poor decision by taking a different route. Decisions made in addressing economic issues can have significant implications and should be carefully considered. I believe I mentioned myself a few times. We've answered that query that many have posed, but not sufficiently. Repeatedly addressing public concerns is necessary to ensure comprehensive understanding and effective solutions. Why him? What is your future plan? He inquired. Trust in public officials and their plans for the future is crucial for public confidence and support. Choosing a vice president is crucial, you said to me, as you now understand that negative things might happen. The selection of key officials can impact the effectiveness of economic policies and governance. Are you trusting this guy then? Furthermore, discuss him if you do. Public trust in leadership is essential for successful implementation of economic policies. She intends to select a different vice president. Prepared for that? This man, is he ready? Evaluating the preparedness and capabilities of leaders is crucial for addressing economic challenges and achieving effective governance. In conclusion, addressing the issue of inflation requires a comprehensive understanding of its impact on various demographics and socioeconomic classes. Effective policies and informed public discourse are essential for mitigating the effects of inflation and ensuring economic stability and prosperity for all. In a fiery interview conducted on Wednesday in front of a predominantly Black audience, Trump attacked a group of Black female journalists on many occasions and implied that Vice President Kamala Harris had changed her race to aid in her election. He spoke up for his followers, who had been found guilty in relation to the Capitol attack on January 6. The outgoing president also asserted that he was the greatest president for Black Americans since Abraham Lincoln, while evading questions about whether his running partner, J.D. Vance, would be ready on day one. The audience was in disbelief after the 34-minute speech, which was reportedly cut short at the Trump campaign's insistence. It's probably the most unusual presidential interview I've ever seen, commented Terry Marsh, a Norfolk State University associate professor of media. He seems to shy away from responding to inquiries that are significant to our community. All he wanted to do was lay out his plans. I don't understand why he came. At a time when he and Harris are stepping up their campaign, conducting more events and releasing advertisements, Trump gave his remarks to the largely Black audience. However, his outbursts against Harris show the glaring contrast between the two candidates. One is a white man with a history of controversial remarks who has been criticized for his treatment of women, people of color, and journalists, and occasionally all three at once, while the other is a woman of Black and South Asian descent. The former president got into an argument with ABC News senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott, who moderated the event, along with Fox News anchor Harris Faulkner and Semaphore political reporter Katia Goba. All three are black women journalists, a group Trump has regularly disparaged. The argument started as soon as the former president took his seat on stage. To begin with, I don't believe I've ever had a first question asked of me in such a terrible way. Not even hello, how are you, is said. Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a terrible network, a fake news network. Scott asked Trump, referring to his previous remarks against the company as reasons why black voters should trust you. Scott posed a hostile inquiry, which he described as nasty, according to him. When Trump made similar remarks about April Ryan, Abby Phillip, and Yamiche Alcindor in 2018, then NABJ President Sarah Glover denounced him for verbally abusing journalists, branding his remarks as appalling and irresponsible. Trump criticized the group for starting the panel later than planned because, in his words, it was unable to get its technology to function. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln, he said on Wednesday. Trump did not spend any time in challenging the vice president's racial heritage. She solely promoted Indian ancestry. She was of Indian descent from the beginning. She went black a few years ago, and now that she's black, that's when I found out that she was black. Thus, I'm not sure if she's black or Indian. In response to Republicans who have referred to Harris as a DEI hire, Trump stated Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary for the White House, quickly criticized the remarks. During the White House daily briefing, she addressed reporters, saying, "As a person of color, as a black woman who is in this position that is standing before you at this podium behind this lectern, what he just said, what you just read out to me is repulsive. It's insulting. We ought to show some respect for Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States." In a word, she continued. Next, Trump shifted his focus to a campaign subject he saw as advantageous and attacked Democrats for how they were managing the southern border situation, calling it an invasion of millions. He strengthened his position by claiming that those entering the nation illegally were assuming black jobs, which he described as any job, in which immigrants are taking employment away from black people. The vice president was then targeted by him using a new tactic that he and his associates had practiced, calling her the border czar, and the only one in charge of the problem. Harris received a diplomatic mission in 2021 to assist in addressing the root causes of migration from Central American nations to the United States. After a challenging week for the Republican vice presidential nominee, Vance, Trump did not immediately respond when asked whether he would be ready on day one. "I've always held him and the other contenders in the highest regard. According to historical data, the vice president has no influence on elections," according to Trump. The 1,100 guests at the Hilton Chicago on Michigan Avenue had to wait more than an hour for the event, which NABJ advertised as a fire.